I welcome you to the desk of the Executive Director at Back Bay Mission again today. I am James Pennington. I am grateful to have you here. And I had a lot of different options for what to talk about today. But I determined that since this is Hunger and Homeless Awareness Week, I better stick with that. So it started this past Saturday and it extends through Sunday. And here at Back Bay Mission, we're going to be having our first Hunger and Homeless Awareness Week walk on Saturday, November 20th, and we invite you to participate either virtually or boots on the ground here in Biloxi. We'll be starting to gather at 7:30 a.m., and actually the walk will take place at 8 a.m. this Saturday. And we're going to be meeting at Point Cadet here in Biloxi. And so please join us if you're able. If not, join us in spirit and with your energy. So I want to talk a little bit about, before I begin, I love statistics, and so I'm going to share some statistics, but before I do that, I really want to speak more from the heart and ask you to think about what are basic human rights. What are basic human rights? We talk about happiness, the pursuit of happiness and liberty, and we know what's written into our Constitution, but what are basic human rights? As I've been at this work for many years, social work, in a variety of different settings, as I've been at this work of working with people who are homeless, again, in a variety of different settings, worked with homeless folks in Phoenix that were coming across the border from Guatemala and Honduras and El Salvador, and homeless people who have had a situation in their life and they've lost their housing, they've not been able to pay their rent or their mortgage. And as I think about this, I think about what really are our rights, our human rights. And for me, I've come to the conclusion, for us as humans and human beings, and in community together, that it should be a human right that we have a shelter. And I'm not talking about that we have a shelter that we can rent or we can purchase a home, that we can own a home, but that everybody has the right to have a shelter, whether they can afford it or not, a roof over their heads, a place to lay their head down at night, a place to call home. That seems to be a basic human right to me. I think the other one is food, and I think really it's more than just a can of soup with a pop top. It's actually healthy food that's good for you, that's good for your health. And then I think for me, the third human right is healthcare, and that's something we're drastically we're falling far short in this country of providing good medical care for everybody. And then finally, I would say it's really incredibly important, a basic human right, that we have love. We have people that love us and care for us. Jesus did say, the poor you will always have among you. The poor will always be with you. I've always been really curious about that statement from Jesus, but I think Jesus is saying, like, the need is always going to be there to provide for the widows and the orphans in his day, to provide for those without a home, for those without shelter, for those without good medical care, for those without food, and for those who, I think, in the words of many, many of the great prophets, but especially I think of Mother Teresa and how she said, the greatest gift that we can give is love, and the greatest thing that is sorely lacking from the lives of people is love, especially people living in poverty. So this also reminds me, a couple of weeks ago, or actually a week ago, I was in Ocean Springs at our first task force on homelessness. And it was about 40, 45, 50 people there, gathered from Ocean Springs, from Biloxi, providers, individuals who were interested, business people, because Ocean Springs, which is kind of a twin city to Biloxi, just over the bridge, they feel that homelessness is becoming a problem, right? An increasing problem. That there's more homeless not only in downtown Ocean Springs and kind of their beautiful downtown kind of shopping area, but also in the eastern part of Ocean Springs. And so at the very beginning of the meeting, somebody raised their hand and they said, well, they can just get a job because there's all sorts of jobs out there. We need to hire people, right? And I thought to myself, and then I spoke up and said, You need to understand how difficult it is to get a job if you're homeless. You need to understand how difficult it is to get a job if you're worrying about your next meal. You're worrying about where you're going to sleep at night. You don't have an ID. You don't have your Social Security card. You don't have good medical care. You can't get a shower. You can't wash your hair. You don't have clean clothes. And all of the issues that kind of snowball, right? And so as we're thinking about this particular week that we're in, this week of hunger and homeless awareness, I think to many of our volunteers that come down here. In fact, we were having a conversation with several volunteers this morning. And we have 2 brand new long-term volunteers who are here at least for a month, right? And they stay at our long-term volunteer housing. And they said, before I could come down for a week, I could do the work here, I could interact with people, we could do the housing projects, we could go to the Micah Day Center, but then I'd get in my car, get on the airplane and leave. And it was a little easier to kind of put that in the back of my mind. But they both said, having been here for 4 weeks in a row, it was much harder to do that. And they felt really engulfed in homelessness outside the window of the cottage, every day as they're here on our property, as they're working in neighborhoods, that they have that sense that they're among the poor, and that makes a huge difference. So ask yourself, what is homelessness? What does it mean to be homeless? For most, it's probably a very technical definition, which is lacking stable, appropriate housing. People oftentimes are categorized homeless if they're living on the streets, if they're panhandling, if they're living under bridges. Here, if they're living on the beach. Here, also, people live in the forest. Back in Phoenix, people set up tents in the desert and lived in tents in the desert, which they do in the forest here too. But it's not having a permanent dwelling, having a temporary shelter. Now, actually, here on the coast, we don't really consider people that are couch hopping, that don't have a home but are couch hopping with friends and family, to be homeless. Although I think we need to think about how one argument or one fight or one disruption or one challenging conversation can put that person out on the street. But homelessness is really just not having that security of a home. And one of the volunteers said today, because they've been here for 4 weeks, and they said, I can't even imagine what it'd be like to be homeless now. And he said, I couldn't survive out there. I wouldn't survive out there. And as we kind of talked it through, we realized that people really are resilient. And they can indeed survive and sometimes even thrive being homeless, right? Although that's incredibly challenging. And he said, well, maybe I do have family I can fall back on. That if I lost my home, they'd be able to help me. If I lost my job, if I lost my income, if I lost my retirement or my Social Security. And how do we look at homelessness here in Biloxi? Well, here in Biloxi, we do a point in time, as most cities do, and we kind of count up how many homeless people are here on this one night designated. Out of 365 days, we have one night we do a homeless count. And generally, there's somewhere around 200 people that are homeless, which means that's probably just the tip of the iceberg. Most cities have this point in time. Most cities estimate the homeless population, but they don't really know what the homeless population, how big the homeless population is. And at this point in time, we're to do interviews, right? And we're to ask homeless folks, people who are unsheltered, what is it you need? Identify your needs for us. And I think oftentimes they don't even know what they need, but the one need they do know is they need a roof over their heads. And here I go kind of geeking out on statistics again. But in 2005, and that's some of the best statistics we have, right? I know they're old, but they estimated that there were about 100 million people worldwide who were homeless. And as many as 1 billion people that were squatters, refugees, living in temporary shelters, or living in what is not considered adequate housing. And strangely enough, in Western countries, the majority of homeless people have been men, almost 75 to 80%, especially single males are homeless, the largest part of the homeless population. And I think what we need to understand about the homeless population, people who are unsheltered, is is they really have a high risk for mental health issues, because if you've been homeless for a while and you didn't have mental health issues when you entered into homelessness, you're going to have them once you're homeless for a while, because you're treated as an other. You're not really recognized. You're really not treated as human, because most of us who are not homeless, who have homes, who have apartments, who have mortgages, who have cars, who have clean clothing, who have food on our tables, when we see somebody that's homeless, we oftentimes avert our eyes. We don't even look at them, right? Because I think, number one, it makes us uncomfortable, because in our heart of hearts, we know that we could be them, and we know that we are them, and that we are one people, and it makes us uncomfortable to be around people who are homeless, because they don't represent what we understand to be culture in society, the normal culture in society. So I think here in Biloxi, we're probably about the same as other states and other cities. As far as homelessness, we see that the majority of our homeless population at the Micah Day Center are older white males. We find the majority of individuals accessing our services that we call homeless prevention are oftentimes women of color in single households. But my basic premise is, nobody should worry about, in this country of plenty, of dumpsters full of food that has been thrown out by grocery stores, right? Nobody here should worry about food or a roof over their head. But the reality is, it's an incredibly widespread problem. In the U.S., so many Americans are on the edge, forced to choose between basic necessities like purchasing food, paying rent, or going to the doctor. In fact, we believe that there's about 37 million Americans who live below the poverty level. That on any typical night in the United States, there's almost 600,000 people without homes. Now remember, that's cyclical. So some of those people the next night may be housed, but then there's going to be new people that become homeless. And there are some that are chronically homeless, that experience homelessness on a pretty regular basis throughout their lives. There's 44 million people in America who are suffering from hunger. And 1 in 6 children in the United States are living in poverty. Now, those are some pretty staggering numbers. And to be honest, in all of this crazy polarization and rhetoric in our country, it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat or Green Party or you're registered independent. None of that really matters when it comes to the issue of homelessness and when it comes to the issue of having food, enough food to keep your belly full, and a house to keep you warm. Because to me, those are basic human needs, basic human rights. And so that's what I'd like you to think about this week, is how can you be a part of the change that we want to see in the world? Gandhi, right? Who said, be a part of that change. And for me, I guess I would encourage you just to notice people that are without homes in your town, in your city, wherever it is you live, and then just take a moment as you pass them, or as you stop at a stoplight and somebody's holding a sign that says, I'm hungry, give me some money, I don't have a job. Look them in the eyes and just acknowledge their presence. That doesn't mean you have to put any money in their hands, and if you so choose, that's your choice. I usually carry water and granola bars in my truck so I can give people something. And that takes away some of that anxiety we all have about, well, if I give them money, they're going to go buy liquor. Well, hey, we buy our liquor too, right? So why not let them buy liquor? Sometimes that's the way I feel about it. And maybe that's going to help them through the day, like sometimes it helps all of you through a day or through a challenging time, which probably isn't a good practice anyway, right? But I think those are the realities, right? And to really, really engage with just a look with somebody who's homeless and a smile. Because I think, again, as I started in the beginning, that our basic human rights are really food and shelter, a house, and medical care, and love. And so I think when Jesus tells us, the poor you'll always have among you, that's the truth. We have never been able to eradicate poverty. Now, here at Back Bay Mission, that would probably be one of our goals, is to eradicate poverty, but we also realize that probably will never happen. With our coalition called Open Doors of agencies that are doing this work, not-for-profits that are doing this work on the coast. I mean, we'd like to say that we'll have everybody housed, right, 100%, but we also know the minute we get somebody inside the door of a house, that there's somebody that's probably being kicked out of a house or evicted, right? And so the reality is that we need to really be aware, be awake, notice in your neighborhood, notice in your city, in your town, and be a part of the change of kind of a worldwide movement of love and of compassion and of providing for the needs of others. So I thank you for joining me today. As always, we solicit your support of Back Bay Mission in whatever way you feel called to support us. We'd love you to come down and do some work with us. We think, right, things are getting much better as far as COVID, and our infection rate is down here in Mississippi. So come join us, be a part of the solution of rehabbing homes, of feeding people who are hungry, of helping individuals who have no home to shower, to connect with a case manager, to get some clean clothing, to possibly have an energy bill or energy bill paid if we're working with somebody who indeed is potentially going to be homeless. So come down and share in that with us and stay for a while, because it will impact your life, and it will certainly impact the lives of those that you have an opportunity to touch and to work with. So just one more shout out for our Hunger and Homeless Walk. For Hunger and Homeless Awareness Week this Saturday, starting at 8 o'clock at Point Cadet Plaza. So join us, start gathering at 7:30. If you can't be there, then join us in heart and mind. So thank you for joining me today, and blessings on your day.